everybody, welcome back. I'm KK,
Kristen.
and together we are K&K Crochet, and I'm all tangled up with the words today. So this video is kind of a chit chat. I had kind of just been listening to some things that people had said this week about things that we want to do and things we don't want to do as we continue with 2023. And one of the things that I had heard multiple times, which to me I didn't understand, because when I learned to crochet, well, first of all, I learned by somebody trying to teach me, like physically sitting down and showing me, and it did not work. Like, I got the basics, but I couldn't get past a chain or a chain and a single crochet row. I didn't understand enough of what she was trying to show me, and she really didn't have patience, which with me she needed a lot. So I was like 8. So I later learned from a stitch book. I actually had a physical. I wish I still had it. It was a library book that was about that thick that I had picked up at a book sale, and it had stitches for embroidery and sewing and cross stitch and crochet and knitting. I wish I still had that book because it was amazing. It had a brown cover and a red spine, and it was probably 1960s or 50 something. I don't know, but it was a great book, and I referred to it a lot. So that's how I went back and taught myself and learned how to do doilies and all that kind of stuff. So, but it never dawned on me that some people don't read patterns. I just thought everybody read patterns, I guess. See, that's my own gap in understanding about things. But I really think that I just kind of thought that's how we all started. And then sometimes we transition to videos so that we could understand by tutorials. But we all learn differently. And as a teacher, I should understand that we all learn differently when it comes to everything. Some of us are visual learners. Some of us are hands-on. I'm the type that if somebody, like, you could sit there and explain to me until you're blue in the face and talk, but I have to see you do it. I have to visually see it. So, like with math, which is my favorite thing, you could talk to her blue in the face. It didn't make any difference to me. I needed you to physically work the problem and show me how to do it, and then I could plug and chug and figure out anything from there. I just needed to see you do it a couple of times, and then it was good. So that's kind of where that is. But anyway, so talking about patterns and learning to read patterns and things that, so this video is to talk about things that I wish I had known before even more than just learning to read patterns, but even lately, things that I've picked up on as I've been walking through YouTube and learning things. It's kind of interesting to learn that you do things differently. Is there a right and a wrong way? Is there a right and a wrong way to do things? I find that questionable at times when it comes to crochet, because everybody does things differently, right? And so for years I had done for years when I looked at a pattern, if it said MC or MR, which is the first thing I would say about learning to read patterns, is you need to learn the shortcuts, the abbreviations that people use for things, and not everybody uses the same ones. They're supposed to. If they write a pattern, there's a certain, and I can't remember, I've heard it talked about before, there's a certain way that you write a pattern, just like there's a certain way you write an essay, right? A format. But some say MC, some say MR. So that's magic ring or magic circle, and that is when you take the yarn and you wrap it around and you pull your hook through and you pull the yarn through, and that's a ring that you start and you put your work into, right? Like it might say 6 double crochet. It might say MR 6 double crochet or 6 double crochet MR. So it means 6 double crochet in the magic ring, or MC for magic circle. If I saw magic circle is what I always heard it called for years. If I saw that at the beginning of the pattern, I X'd out of the pattern. Went somewhere else, didn't do it. Terrified of making a magic ring, magic circle. Couldn't figure it out, couldn't figure out how to do it. I just didn't understand it. I didn't know how to do it, and it didn't matter how many times I tried, I couldn't do it. Now, I don't know who I finally watched to be able to do it, but I'm telling you that I've been doing a magic ring now for a couple of years, probably more than a couple, and this year found a new way to do it. I always just wrapped around once and then pulled my yarn through like this. I don't have my hook. I don't know what I did with it. Let me see. Hold on. This is a Tunisian hook, but it'll work for this. So I would pull my yarn through then, and I would, like, having a hard time with this, wrap it around, and then I would just start to do my chain, like chain up 2. This is not wanting to work because it's crazy. Hold on. I would pull it through and wrap it around, and then I would start, and I would chain 2 for my first double crochet, which some people count as their first stitch and some don't. That's another thing when you're starting to read patterns. You need to know, are they counting that as a stitch or are they not? And it should tell you whether or not that's counted as a stitch. And how you do that depends on how your finished project's going to look. But then I would just start and make my double crochets into my ring. And then I would pull the ring shut at the end, and you just have this nice little circle. Well, here lately, somebody I saw had wrapped the yarn around twice. And I thought, wow, why did they do that? So when I wrapped the yarn around twice like that, and then went under and did the same thing, and I would go to pull on the tail, then I would pull on the tail and see which one of these 2 strings it was pulling. Whichever one it was pulling on, I would pull on that one, but pull on the opposite end so it would shrink that one circle in, and then it shrinks in the next circle. And I know I'm not doing a good job of telling you about this, but there are videos out there that will show you, and when they show you a magic circle or a magic ring and they wrap the yarn around their hand twice, that one has held better for me, and it's made me feel more secure in what I was doing. So my first tip is that everybody does everything different. So if you watch a video or you look at a pattern and you're confused or you don't understand it, go watch somebody else do it. Okay? Or when you're reading the pattern, look at what it says and then go watch a video that explains it. I would say go get a pattern that you are familiar with. A lot of you love to do the divine hat. I know I've seen that over and over, and Kristen did that. Go find somebody who has both a written and a video tutorial on a pattern that you have already made or that you can make. Work through the video pattern and then go back and look at the written pattern and correspond the two, and it will help you understand what they're trying to tell you about how a pattern is written. I also wish that I would have realized early on that I needed to read at the beginning of a pattern the type of materials that were used, the hook that was used, the gauge swatch for you to figure out if yours is going to match theirs, and the fact that it would tell you in that whether or not those first stitches are counting, those first chains are counting up, those 2 chains are counting as a first stitch, a first double crochet, or if they're coming back around and they're crocheting into the first real stitch, what I call a real stitch, and ignoring that chain up, because it makes a difference in what your pattern looks like in the end. It took me a while to figure that out. It also took me a while to figure out that at the end of each row, a good pattern will tell you at the end of each round on your pattern how many stitches you should have. So in parentheses, it'll say like 6, so you should have had 6 double crochet. And then when you go to increase, it will say on the next round it might say 12 because you put 2 stitches in one. So that helped me a lot too, to figure out and to count. Don't be afraid to count when you're doing those written patterns, because it's easy to get confused. The other thing is that I had such a hard time at first understanding an increase row. So if you're doing a hat, when you're making a hat and you're crocheting, and let's say you start with 6 double crochet in the magic ring, then you would have 6 stitches. And then it will say on the next one, it may just say increase, I-N-C, increase in every stitch. I had no idea what that meant. That to me threw me off. It simply means that you're putting 2 of the stitch that you're using into one stitch. So an increase in if you start with 6 double crochet, an increase is going to mean that you're going to put 2 double crochets in each stitch around. You're increasing, you're adding a stitch extra in each stitch. So that will give you 12. If you have 6 and you put 2 in each one, you're going to have 12. So once I figured out that, then that helped me understand better what they were doing. And if you understand a written or a verbal tutorial about increases like that, then you're going to be easy. It's going to be easier for you to understand the written portion. Now I've gotten till I do a lot of video tutorials as far as like watching them to crochet, but I prefer a written pattern because I want to watch some of you crochet and talk while I'm working on the pattern. I don't want to be able to read the pattern. But that's because that's what I got comfortable with in the beginning. Had I learned from a video, I probably would not be comfortable with a pattern. I would say that your best bet is to find a pattern that is both written and a tutorial, verbally and physically showing you what to do, and work through it both ways. And that way you will understand more about what they're trying to tell you. Also, don't be discouraged if you get a pattern and it doesn't make sense, because I've had patterns that don't make sense like that, and I had to go watch a video to figure out, and I wasn't the only one, because the way I was reading, the way I was taught to read it was not the way they were wording the pattern, and it's because that's the way they were taught to word the pattern. There is no right or wrong. It's just that we weren't communicating in the same language, so to speak. Which brings me to a whole nother thing. And when you're talking about patterns, you have to be careful that it is an English pattern. It's written in English terms, because, or in U.S. terms. There is a different set of terms for the UK. So what they say is not what ours is. I think their double crochet is a single crochet. I can't remember. Anyway, it's completely different, and I can't train my brain to do that. I just cannot in a pattern. I've done it maybe one time. I think that was for banana duck. I'm not good at doing that. It drives me nuts. Can you do that? No. I would have to rewrite the entire pattern. I just can't do that. It doesn't bring me joy. I'm not doing it, right? So when you look at things like that, just think about that. Take your time. Start simple. Find a pattern that looks like something that you've done before, that you physically know how to do, because you have the skills. It's just you're not speaking the same language, right? You get it physically. You understand how to do it. You understand when it's shown to you. You know what the stitches are. It's just the language that's used in the pattern is not the, it's not the exact same language. You're speaking the same thing. It's just you're speaking it in a different language. So a double crochet, a DC for a double crochet, you're just used to hearing double crochet and going for it. So you can do it. It's not difficult. It's just a matter of going back and looking through. And also, some people don't always, it's okay to not do it the way the pattern says. That was another thing I wish I'd been taught. Because you know what I figured out? If it says magic ring and I don't want to do a magic ring, I can chain 4 or 5, however many I need, to put the stitches into a circle and slip stitch back into the original stitch, the first one, and use that as a magic ring. Whatever. Probably more like 3, so it'd be smaller, but you can do that. Or if I get to a pattern now, and let's say I am 3/4 of the way through the pattern, and I realize that on this particular round I'm short a stitch. I'm decreasing, and I don't have, or no, let's say I'm increasing, and I'm going around, and I've got to the point where I'm at the end and I'm short a stitch. I'm probably not going to rip out that row, especially if it's a big project where I've had to do 60 or 70 or 80 stitches in a round. I'm not ripping it out. If it's short a stitch, I'm going to add an extra stitch by increasing in one of the stitches. That's just the way it is. Let's say it's single crochet, and I've gone all the way around, and I'm counting my stitches, which I advise you to do, and I have 59 stitches, and I'm supposed to have 60. I'm adding an extra single crochet in that last stitch. It's just the way it's going to be.
That's how I do it.
Let's say it's supposed to have 60 and I have 61. I'm not ripping it out. I'm going to do a decrease right there. 9 times out of 10, one of those is not going to throw your work off. Now, if you do that every round, you got a problem, and you need to go back and you need to learn how to slow down and count and make sure you're on the right path. I'm not doing that every round. I'm talking about one row in a project where I'm not ripping it out. And you have to give yourself permission to do that. It's okay. It's not that big of a deal. It's really not, for the most part, when you're looking at something. Now, if you have a pattern like this, that's a little different. I mean, if you mess it up, it's going to be very visible. But if you're doing, because it's very spaced out and it's very textured and you can tell where the pattern's supposed to be. But if you're doing single crochet and double crochet and you're just increasing and decreasing around, it's not going to show for the most part. At least not enough for me to change it. Now, if I'm making it for somebody else, I might go back and change it. But it's got to be a really, really big boo-boo for me to do that, because I'm just not going to do it. I'm not going to do it because I know the way to fix those problems. I've even been known to miss a double crochet in the row down below and to reach down and double crochet into that row and then double crochet up into the next row above it. I've done it on something that was for me, but I've done it because I didn't want to rip it back out. It is what it is. If it's plain stitching and I'm off a stitch, I will either add or decrease to make it work. And those are the tips and tricks that you need to know to be able to make things work so that you don't drive yourself nuts. When I first started, I would have ripped all the way back. Nope. I'm not doing it. It's a no. It's one of those no's, you know. No, not this year. Not joy, not happening. And maybe you don't do it that way. But is there a right or a wrong way? Maybe. Do I care? Probably not. If it's for me, I don't care. If it's right for me, it's right for me, and that's all I care about. If I'm doing it for somebody else and it's a gift or whatever, then yeah, I'm going to be a little bit more particular. But for something that I know, my husband says all the time, you're the only one that's going to notice that. And I said, no, crocheters will know. And he said, they're not going to look that close. And he's right, because it's for me, and nobody's going to be looking that close to see it. So it is what it is. So just a few thoughts that I have on learning to pattern read, and I wish you luck as you do that this year. And if you have questions of things that, as you pattern read, that don't make sense, feel free to ask. Comment below. I don't have any problem looking at a pattern and saying, you know, this is what they mean. Everybody writes differently. That's what I'm going to tell you, that everybody writes differently, even though there's a set way for a pattern to be written and published. In the world of YouTube, everybody writes differently. In the world of crochet, everybody writes differently. And they're going to write things in a manner that doesn't make sense to you. And it's okay to not do the pattern exactly. I always just say, if I did a pattern, this is what I did different. So that people don't look at it and say, well, that's not what they did. Well, no, but it's what I did. And so I used their pattern, and then I tweaked it my way. Nothing wrong with that. You do you, right? Anyway, you're being quiet. Why are you being so quiet? Words.
I don't know.
She's talked already. Look at that face. All right, she's making those faces again. Anyway, we wish you a good week. Be kind, because you don't know anybody else's journey. And we will see you next week. Have a good one. Bye.
Bye.